You may begin.
Stop it.
Have you guys ever lost someone very close to you in your life? Some people have, some people haven't. In life, you learn many lessons, and one of these lessons is that people in your life do not stay in your life forever. There's a point where you have to let go. There are many life experiences that have changed who I am, but one of the most important is when I about lost my father in 2005. There was many effects that took place with my family, many effects that took place, as well as many consequences. Whenever I was 5 years old, my dad was hospitalized for 5 days over the Christmas season. When we went to the hospital, they told my family that my dad was in very critical condition. He had gotten pneumonia from a gas leak that had happened at our church earlier in the year. That gas leak caused him to have respiratory problems, which was then the cause they hospitalized him. My father, being strong, was in the hospital for 5 days. Over Christmas, we were only allowed to open one gift because we couldn't bring all of our gifts to the hospital. Being in the hospital with my dad led me to have many emotions throughout that period. One of my emotions was jealousy of my father. I was very jealous that my dad got to stay in bed all day, lie around, and not have to do any work. Being 5 years old, having to do work was not fun at all. I was also jealous because my nurse would come in and talk to my mom about how my dad was in very unstable condition. So my mom would talk to us about heaven. This shows transactional interpretation because my mom would talk to us and we would reply back to her. I was also very angry towards many people in my life during the hospitalization of my father. I was very angry at God because I had a fear of losing my father, and I would keep talking to God about how I wanted to keep my father. So I felt that this was a linear communication because I would be praying to God, and I felt like he was not listening to anything what I was saying. It also reminded me of the person Thraspalus, because Thraspalus would take away people's homes without asking them, and I felt like God was taking away my father without asking me. Another reason I was angry was because the chairs in the hospital were quite uncomfortable. It was very hard to sleep at that time. And then my siblings and I would be pushed out of the room by the nurses. This is a symbol the nurses gave to us because they would push us without actually saying anything, just telling us that we needed to leave. Another reason I was angry was because we had to wait to open our gifts. Being 5 years old, I loved getting Christmas gifts. I always loved it, but we had to wait because we couldn't bring all of them to the hospital. I was also very angry because trying to sleep in a hospital, there's lots of noises. There's many heart monitors that were there, which is a feature of noise because with the noise you could never sleep because of all the heart monitors. There's also olfactics, which is the sense of smell. There's many smells in a hospital that I do care not to remember sometimes. And then an unusual feeling I had was excitement. I was very excited because, heck, I was in the hospital for the first time ever. This was, or at least that I could remember. This was a pretty great experience, under the circumstances, that is. I was also very excited because my mom would talk to me about heaven. She would tell me that someday God would call my father to heaven and this could be one of the days. This shows the interactive model because I would be talking to my mom about my dad going to heaven as well as she would talk back to me. Another reason I was excited because there was an elevator. When I walked through the doors with my family, there was an elevator there. And me, I don't remember ever riding an elevator before then. So I asked my mom if we could ride an elevator, and she said yes. This made me quite happy. This shows nonverbal communication because instead of replying with yes, she nodded her head so she could keep me quiet. Whenever we went to the hospital, I realized I had to put all of my emotions aside and think about the effects that would take place with my dad being in the hospital. After my dad was released, there was many effects that happened in our family life and elsewhere. My dad was cleared and came home, but my dad had very little strength to do anything. He was barely to walk for a while because he had been in such bad critical condition earlier. My siblings and I were forced to do more work than normal. This made me quite angry because I was bored of doing work all the time, especially filling in for my dad when he wasn't there. We used teamwork, which Wood talks to us about. We had to use our teamwork to work together to get jobs done. My siblings and I would argue a lot to decide which was the better job to use and which was the better way to perform this job. You could call this argumentation because we always try to argue to prove the better point of who got the job or what way to do the job. As well as there being effects, there's some positive and negative tolls that took place on my family life. Money was very tight at that time. We had to slim down on what kind of food we ate and how much food we ate. It also took a toll because my dad had gotten a call to a Catholic church earlier, or a Lutheran church, but we were told that we'd have to go to a Catholic school. So whenever he was hospitalized, we had to decide, well, maybe this isn't what God wanted us to do. So we were put in a position where we had to turn down the call. My family was very on edge and we were very annoyed with each other. Every time my siblings and I would fight, our mom or our dad would always yell at us immediately. I mean, they usually yelled at us, but it wasn't always right away. And we would always get spanked if we got too rambunctious. Our mom just wouldn't tolerate all of the noise. There was lots of constant phone calls, which includes the noise, because there was so much noise in our house that it felt like there was no time to sleep and no time for us to talk. We are always being bugged with the noise, with constant phone calls. My dad being in the hospital also had a positive toll on us. We realized that it's very easy to lose someone in your life, and you can't take anything for granted. Every time we thought about our dad almost dying, we talked about how we all got closer together. We had to appreciate every single second that we had with our family. When my mom realized what was going on afterwards, she realized that we needed to become closer, so she made this trip to Florida. We got to go to Florida. Now this trip would be our first family trip and our last family trip. Being close with our family meant calling our relatives. Our mom would always make us call our relatives, maybe a few times a week, but to me, being so young, it seemed like we called them every single day. And I got bored of calling my relatives and talking about the same thing over and over again. I'd always complain, and my siblings would always complain, which shows interpersonal communication. Sometimes in life, you have to learn to let go and let life run its natural course. You can't change that. There are many emotions involved in losing a family member or close relative, as well as many effects that will take place in your life. I personally experienced this during the Christmas season with my father in 2004. We do not have to be frightened about this or anything, because we need to realize that God is always with us and He won't leave us. Even if we don't have the right amount of strength, He has the strength that He'll help us.
Thank you very much.